We are now a couple weeks away from fantasy football trade deadline. So today we're going to be bringing you guys about 5 trade targets, guys you can go after to help bolster your fantasy football rosters heading into the fantasy football playoffs, especially if you guys are, 7-2, 8-1, 9-0, maybe 6-3, something like that. You're going to want to definitely take advantage of some buy lows in fantasy football, make your team better as the time that we want to, play for the fantasy football playoffs where all of the money comes near. So definitely pay attention to the end of this video. Hit the like if you enjoy, subscribe, all that good stuff. Now let's get into it. All right, Danny, I'll let you kick it off. Who is your first buy low of the video here?
Yeah, and like you kind of said, this is the time to turn your contenders into championship level teams. And let's get this right off the bat. I'm not saying that you're going to be buying this guy at what I thought he was coming into the season, but his value is absolutely criminal right now based off the expectations he set, based off past results this year. And I'm talking about Tony Pollard, running back of the Dallas Cowboys. I'll be honest, he does not look like the same runner that I projected coming into the season. And I'm not saying you're buying him with top 3 to 5 expectation. However, this is still a running back on a top 5 to 10 offense rest of way who garners the type of workload which at least gets him, in my opinion, to the back end running back 1 range. Again, like I said, the results haven't been there. The Cowboys are scoring a bunch of defensive touchdowns. We even saw last week, Tony Pollard got a touchdown erased off the board. It's been a lot of bad luck so far this year, but the upcoming schedule for Dallas is why I'm buying Tony Pollard right now. In their next projected 4 games, it's going to be a team implied for 25 plus points. And in each of these games, I expect them to be the favorite. Giants, Panthers, Commanders, and Seahawks in these games. I think it's a potential get-right spot, and his cost is extremely deflated right now. People who drafted Tony Pollard, people who have rostered Tony Pollard thus far, are pretty much sick of this guy. They see this guy with another sub 10-point performance against the Eagles. This was like the get-right spot everybody was talking about, high game environment, and people might just be sick of him at this point. And we're seeing some of these deals. Kareem Hunt and Khalil Herbert for Tony Pollard straight up. Christian Kirk and Miles Sanders for Tony Pollard. This one, if you need a tight end, I don't mind moving off of Derrick Henry to get Tony Pollard and Taysom Hill. And even this one at the bottom, I don't know how realistic this is, but if you're in a more casual league, somebody recognizes the name Aaron Jones, and you can flip Aaron Jones and Josh Downs for Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard. These are all deals I want the Tony Pollard side on, because I do think, like I said, in these next few games in particular, his value should see a spike up.
Yeah, so in the rest of season rankings video that I dropped yesterday, I talked about Tony Pollard as being a decent buy low because I still view him in that same back-end RB1 range. Like you said, we don't view him as the same league-winning legendary upside guy that he was coming into the season, because it's pretty clear that he's not quite the same running back that we saw in 2022 and 2021 when he was, among the elites in terms of, PFF rushing grade and, tackles avoid and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit on Tony Pollard because I think that he might honestly just not be that good this year because he's playing hurt. And that would really, hurt your bottom line if you buy low on Tony Pollard, because in more sharp leagues, you're going to have to pay a pretty hefty price still on Tony Pollard. You're not going to get him for, let's say Rachaad White and a bench piece wide receiver. If that's the price for him, yes, definitely go out and make those type of moves. But if you have to pay up, let's say Derrick Henry plus or a Breece Hall type or somebody in that area of the rankings, that might be what it costs you to go get to Tony Pollard, a Josh Jacobs type, somebody like that. And I'm simply not willing to make that move because I feel a lot more comfortable with those other guys. So again, as is the case with all of our trade targets videos, it depends on the price, but definitely keep that in mind with Tony Pollard. The manager might be sick of him, or he might be more willing to hold on to where he drafted the guy, which was probably early 2nd round.
Yeah, it all depends on the cost, of course. Like you kind of shared that sentiment there. If you're having to add on some of those guys, like you said, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, etc., I'm just not likely to buy him at that cost. He's my RB9 rest of the season, so I still have him as a back-end running back 1. I just think the shared sentiment for the most part is people might think of him as a mid-range RB2, back-end RB2, because the point production hasn't been there.
Yeah, and I sold Kenneth Walker plus I sold Kenneth Walker and I believe it was Tyler Algier and Josh Palmer coming off of a big week. And I got Drake London and Tony Pollard in that trade as a buy low, which I thought was a great move. Hasn't really come to fruition yet because London was out and Pollard hasn't been really good. But I do think that's the type of move that you're looking to make. Maybe see if you can get a running back on the upswing like a Rachaad White, who we'll talk about later, and see if you can get to Pollard that way. So my buy of the video, my first buy, my number 1 buy, I would say in all of fantasy football right now, is Davante Adams, wide receiver of the Las Vegas Raiders. Finished as a top 24 wide receiver on any given week, just one time the past 5 games that he's played. So it has mainly been the vibes that has caused this, in my opinion. Like the whole
Yeah.
Raiders situation, complete train wreck. He's the most outspoken veteran on that team about the whole Josh McDaniels situation. I think the big games are coming. I think, the new coaching staff there, it looks like Davante Adams a little bit more locked in. I refuse to believe that he's not the same elite wide receiver he's always been. Maybe he's not going to finish, wide receiver 2 in points per game or something like that, but he's definitely a back end wide receiver 1 at the very least. 30% target share, 40% of the air yards of this offense, despite, Jacoby Myers having a pretty good season so far. The Raiders were scoring the second least points per game entering this week. When they put up a bunch of points on the Giants, they had, I think it was like 5 or 6 games where they hadn't scored 20 points. So this is an offense that was completely anemic for a while. They seem to have new life. You guys can see this chart on the screen here. Pass routes versus receiving targets per route run. Pretty much the only guy that ranks better is Tyreek Hill. He's Davante Adams on par with guys like Steph Diggs and Brandon Aiyuk and all these like top end wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Davante Adams still the same peripherals that we've always seen from him. And right now, I mean, some of these highlighted deals are just completely ridiculous. If you can get Davante Adams for like Chris Godwin or Christian Kirk or something like that, obviously you run to do it. A more realistic deal is the one that I have circled there, Mike Evans and Alexander Mattison. Mike Evans, been pretty solid this year, but more of a wide receiver 2. Alexander Mattison coming off a big week. Cam Akers now out for the season. If you can pair 2 guys like that and get up to Davante Adams, a wide receiver 2 and an RB2, get yourself up to a wide receiver 1. Those are the types of trades we always like making. And that's something that I think is reasonable that you could actually do for a guy that has a good, upside down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple to me when it comes to the wide receiver position. Anytime I can buy low on elite talent, I'm always going to do so. And it's simple. In my opinion, I think Davante Adams is still a tier 1 NFL wide receiver. Yes, the situation isn't as crystal clean as, AJ Brown in Philadelphia, CeeDee Lamb in Dallas. But like you kind of said, low end wide receiver 1 expectations. He already showed some blow up potential earlier in the season. And Aiden O'Connell in these last couple games when he's gotten the start has prioritized getting Davante Adams his target. So expected fantasy points per game per QBL Ryan, aka Ryan Heath of fantasy points. Josh Jacobs, obviously a big time workhorse in those 2 games, but Davante Adams, 18.5 expected PPR points per game, which would rank as a top 8 wide receiver across a full season. So as long as he can just meet that type of level, continue that type of involvement, like you kind of said, some of those deals right now, the Mike Evans one in particular, is basically in my opinion, more so valuing him as a top 12 to 14 guy rather than the top 8 to 10 guy I think he is.
Yeah, I know. And it's really easy to look at these, players and think that they're not human beings too. Like the human element of being in a workplace that fucking sucks is a real thing for Davante Adams and for Josh Jacobs too, because we've seen him bounce back in the last couple of games. And I think the correction is coming for Davante Adams. So you want to get ahead of the curve. Your casual league mates are going to look at the game logs and they're going to see he's got like 8 points and 4 points and 9 points or whatever he's got the last couple of games, and go send some offers. See if you can get him for wide receiver 2 price tags. That would be ideal. But even low end wide receiver 1 price tags, I'm willing to buy low on Davante Adams for. So who's your second trade target of the video?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, I love buying low on elite talents. And this might sound like a hot take, but I do think Brandon Aiyuk of the San Francisco 49ers is an elite wide receiver talent in the NFL. In my opinion, he is the superstar wide receiver that nobody quite treats like a superstar yet. You're getting an alpha wide receiver, 30% target share on a top 5 offense in football. And this is just an absolute monster right now. Like I said, 30% seasonal target share, a 49% air yard share of an offense that runs as well as any in the NFL when Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan are getting this thing going. It's a bad stretch for this offense. Don't get me wrong. 3-game losing streak haven't looked quite the same, but they had their bye week for a reason. We're seeing a sample size of 80+% of Brock Purdy starts being very good, with only about 20% against very good defenses in that stretch. In my opinion, I think he's going to step right back up. Second in adjusted yard per route run and top 5 in terms of PFF grade at the wide receiver position. He's around likes of guys like, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb. And yet because he's only the wide receiver 13 in terms of PPR points per game, that's mostly due to him just running dry on touchdowns since week 1, scored in that first game, hasn't scored a touchdown since this year. And in my opinion, he has wide receiver 1 level upside with the cost of a mid to low end wide receiver 2 at this point, aka making him a buy. And some of these deals are just, Jordan Love and Khalil Herbert, doubt that can happen. But if you're in a more casual league, Brandon Aiyuk hasn't scored, maybe you can swing something very cheap there. Gus Edwards, obviously a couple big games, again, more of a casual type of deal. Christian Kirk and TJ Hawkins, probably the first, competitive level offer. I want Brandon Aiyuk there because I just think the ceiling there is massive, like I kind of mentioned. James Cook for him straight up if somebody loves running backs in your league and you can swing that type of deal. And then finally, Justin Fields slated to come back. Somebody needs a quarterback and you have him, stashed on your IR. You can move Justin Fields to try to get a wide receiver here.
Yeah, I think when you look at like the peripherals of like a guy that has 50% of the air yards and he has 40% of the third and fourth down targets, but he only has a 10% end zone and red zone target share on the season, that's going to balance itself out at some point. And I honestly feel like a broken record talking about both Tony Pollard and Brandon Aiyuk, because I feel like we've been talking about these guys as buy lows for like multiple weeks now. But the buy lows are the buy lows. We don't get to decide who they are. Like, it would be nice if we were talking about different players every single week, but that's not really the case. And for what it's worth, Bijan Robinson, also a great buy low right now, but we've talked about him 78 times in the last 2 games. So we have to, not go in depth on Bijan Robinson, but he also would fit the description of a really good buy low. Again, the buy lows are the buy lows. Aiyuk is a buy low, and he's a guy that has wide receiver 1 upside the rest of the season. Like, how unlucky was the stretch of games for Brock Purdy? Like, he had a concussion in one game. He probably didn't clear the protocol in the other game. They were playing good defenses. Things are going to correct themselves. Brock Purdy is a better quarterback than a lot of people on Twitter would have you believe. He's at least a very accurate quarterback. 80% of Brandon Aiyuk's targets have been deemed catchable, and that's pretty crazy considering the guy's a 14.57 average depth of target. So when you're 80% of your targets are catchable that far down the field, that just basically shows you how good he's schemed open and how good his quarterback is at hitting him when he's open. So definitely go buy low on him. You're getting a guy with big play upside, touchdown upside, and one of the best offenses in the league who commands 30% of his team's targets. Very easy, open and shut type of case for him. So my buy lows, I'm going to group these two guys together because they both have very similar outlooks. And the reason I'm buying them both low is basically the same. Drake London and Marquise Brown. I'm grouping them together because they have quarterback upgrades now and they're clear alpha wide receivers on their offense. Since week 2, Drake London is averaging 8 targets per game. Quarterback upgrade comes in with Taylor Heineke. Drake London played 5 snaps before he got injured in that game when Taylor Heineke came in. We haven't seen it bear fruit yet, but I believe that Taylor Heineke, who's more of like a gunslinger, more of like a, throw it up to your type of guy, type of quarterback, Drake London is really, really good in those situations. We've seen how good he is in contested situations. It was one of his biggest strengths coming out of USC, and part of the reason people knocked him. Practiced in a limited fashion today, so it looks like he's going to be healthy. It says he's trending in the right direction by recent reports. He's a wide receiver 2 for me rest of the season. I had him in my wide receiver 2 range in my rest of season rankings, and he is 100% available in your league for wide receiver 3 prices, maybe even wide receiver 4 prices. Marquise Brown, same type of situation. He's 29% target share. This year, he has wide receiver 1 usage, but the reason he's not wide receiver 1 caliber fantasy production because he's played with Josh Dobbs all year and Clayton Tune this past week. 12.5 PPR points per game. Kyler is back this week. He is going to make this offense at least better than it was with Josh Downs, and I wouldn't be shocked if both of these guys ran their way to like top 15 performances the rest of the season. Again, it's about who gets hot at the end of the year. And when you look at their schedules, when you look at the quarterback change, when you look at their target shares, they have the ability to really produce above their means, which is like wide receiver 2s is what I expect them to be. They could produce like low end wide receiver 1s, high end wide receiver 2s rest of the season.
Yeah, and just to play a little bit devil's advocate, because you guys know how high I am, especially on Drake London, but in particular Marquise Brown, given the usage, like these are alpha target earners in their own offenses. But the only, caveat you can say is, well, how exactly do we project these offenses moving forward? Obviously, from the Cardinals' perspective, a 1-8 football team, haven't really looked good. Yes, Kyler's coming back, but how well can he play coming off of that ACL injury? And on the same time with Drake London, like, you still got kind of, Arthur Smith meddling around, still got a very, very strong run game. And although Taylor Heineke, we believe to be an upgrade from Desmond Ridder, he's not the safest quarterback in his own aspect.
Yeah, I will say that Arthur Smith's the only guy he hasn't ruined in this offense is Drake London. He's the one that's actually getting used properly. He gets used in the red zone. He's the clear alpha receiver. It's mainly Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson that we're annoyed with their usage. So I would say Drake London has been productive. Prior to that groin injury, he was having a good game. He probably would have had a really good game once Taylor Heineke came in and Desmond Ridder was benched. And he was quite productive for a number of weeks before that. The schedules aren't that bad. I mean, they play each other this week, actually, ironically. And then the Falcons play the Saints, which are a tough defense, Jets, which are a tough defense, but it opens up down the back half of the season, the Buccaneers, the Panthers, the Colts, the next couple games. And then with the Cardinals, they got the Falcons this week, but then they have the Texans, they have the Rams, Steelers, 49ers, and Bears. So a couple exploitable matchups there. And if you can get Drake London for some of these price tags, Tank Dell, perfect guy to sell high on right now for a guy like Drake London. Dalton Schultz, another good guy to sell high on if somebody needs a tight end. Kyle Pitts, his own teammate. Maybe you can get that done. Maybe you can't. And then with Marquise Brown, some of these deals that I have circled here, Chuba Hubbard and Christian Watson, I think that's a good deal to make to go get Marquise Brown. Najee Harris has been okay in recent weeks. His teammate Jalen Warren would make sense if you could sell him. His other teammate, George Pickens, if you can sell on him with the anticipation that some people might think, oh, George Pickens is the alpha of this offense. It's not Deontay Johnson. It probably is. definitely go out and buy Marquise Brown and Drake London. Both of them are going to be really good options down the stretch, in my opinion.
It's funny that you also circled the Texans, because that's another big philosophy when it comes to trading is everybody is high on CJ Stroud. Everybody is high on this Texans offense. Capitalizing those little market inefficiencies on a week-to-week basis, once you realize the public perception of players really just outmatches the usage, outmatches the projection moving forward, that's a good capitalizing point. So, for example, the Texans put up 39 points. CJ Stroud had over 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. People are going to be optimistic about this offense moving forward. They might view Dalton Schultz as a top 8 tight end, might view, Tank Dell as a top 30 wide receiver. So completely agree that if you can capitalize on those, weekly variances, they're going to be able to work out for you in the long run. So we can move on to my first sell here, and it's going to have some correlation with that jersey you hang right behind you. We got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers man himself, Rachaad White. And it's funny because we mentioned him as a big buy, a few weeks ago, and he's rewarded you. If you bought him at that time, he's rewarded you with some big time points. But I'm afraid to say this is the time to sell him. He's still an inefficient runner on a team that can't run block to save their lives, and now faces 2 daunting defenses in a row against the run in these next couple of weeks. Play against Tennessee Titans, play against San Francisco 49ers. His value right now is really inflated by those big-time performances. A lot of work through the receiving game, scored a couple touchdowns last week. People might be viewing Rachaad White closer to the RB11 he is on the season, rather than probably the mid to low-end running back 2 projection he currently has, in my opinion, the rest of the season. People will see, like I said, that he's top 12 running back, and you may be able to swing some big deals. Like we mentioned, for example, at the top of the video, really like Tony Pollard. If you can use Rachaad White to go work up to Tony Pollard, I would absolutely do that. I personally would rather have Jahmyr Gibbs here. We got into a talk before the video. I'm more likely to go after Jahmyr Gibbs, which is fine. I personally would be willing to give up Rachaad White and Cortland Sutton to go and get Jahmyr Gibbs in this package. Right here, Rachaad White for Christian Kirk and DeAndre Swift. I would rather have Swift straight up, so give me a free Christian Kirk here. And then finally, if you can work up to McCaffrey using Rachaad White, Derrick Henry, Jacoby Myers, like this is the perfect consolidation package. We want elite hammers that can win leagues. And I'll tell you right now, no other running back projects the way Christian McCaffrey does the rest of the season. If you have him in your lineup, you're pretty much pegging in 25 PPR points per game. And I want those needle movers.
Yeah, I mean, like me and Danny are fantasy football day traders. That's essentially what we do. I viewed Rachaad White 4 weeks ago as undervalued. He was a low-end RB2 workload, or high-end RB1 workload, actually, but he's so bad and the offense can't run block that he's more of a low-end RB2. But when you can get him for the price tags he was going at a couple weeks ago, you have to do it because he was going for basically nothing. He was like an RB3. Now, casual league mates, so look, he's the RB11 on the season right now. So you might be able to use him to get up to Jonathan Taylor, to get up to Breece Hall, to get up to Travis Etienne, to get up to Austin Eckler, to get to Bijan Robinson, who's obviously a huge buy low right now. And I bet there's leagues out there that you can maybe trade Rachaad White for Bijan straight up. Or maybe you could trade Rachaad White for David Montgomery, or for Isaiah Pacheco, or for Javonte Williams, or somebody like that. All of those deals make sense. If you're in a winning position, maybe you go after Devon Achane or something like that too. So I do really like using Rachaad White to get up to better assets. And another guy that kind of fits the bill, not been really good this year, kind of like a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 because he's not that good. Alexander Mattison, 2 good things going in his favor. If you have Alexander Mattison, you're probably kind of happy right now because he went from on the downslope because he wasn't getting the workload he used to get. Cam Akers was eating in. Now Cam Akers tears his Achilles. Alexander Mattison, as a result, has a good game, has a 19 PPR points or whatever it was. Selling him off a big week, in addition to Cam Akers being now out for the season, should make it easy for you to get up, like I said earlier, with Mike Evans plus Alexander Mattison to get to Davante Adams, or to get from Alexander Mattison, Rachaad White. Maybe you can consolidate into Jonathan Taylor, or to Josh Jacobs, or to Breece Hall, or to Tony Pollard, or to Bijan Robinson, or something like that. So use these 2 running backs specifically that we're talking about to try and consolidate your assets. Also, honorable mention to Gus Edwards, who scores 6 touchdowns in the last 3 games, including 3 and 2 the last 2 games. So this is a guy that you literally played 18% of the snaps last week and scored 2 touchdowns. So again, if people are not hip to like the usage in your league, if you're in a casual league, they're just going to see the fantasy production. Definitely go out and send some offers involving Gus Edwards, because I think now with Keaton Mitchell into the fold, it's going to be a 3-way timeshare. It's probably going to be a messy backfield split. And I'm not super excited about Gus Edwards rest of the season. Great for my best ball teams that he had a couple spike weeks, but probably not going to be a guy that's like a league winner down the stretch.
Yeah, which is wild. I think we have like a combined 42% Gus Edwards on best ball right now. So obviously, want him to continue doing what he's doing. But this kind of just goes back to the theory like we were talking about earlier, where when a team's coming off a high, for example, with the Texans scoring a bunch of points, CJ Stroud looking good. You can even apply that, of course, to the Minnesota Vikings. Josh Dobbs coming in, heroic comeback, ends up beating the Falcons in this past game. I mean, you can even apply it to Gus Edwards. This guy's been scoring touchdowns at a crazy rate, and Baltimore's looked like arguably the best team in the NFL. So capitalizing on that market perception, inflating people's values is typically a good plan, because if you buy low on some guys that, like Tony Pollard, people don't like Tony Pollard right now. People think he's gross. He doesn't have this upside. Well, guess what? If he goes on the next 4 weeks and he averages 22 PPR points per game, that narrative is going to completely flip. So capitalizing on the narrative while it is at hand is going to be your best benefit.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just going to rattle off a couple like onesie positions in case you're in need of those. If you want to, collect some while I'm talking as well, you could definitely do that. Kyler Murray, clear buy low right now. He might even be available on your waivers still if you're in a shallow league. Definitely go and pick him up / send some offers. Same goes for Justin Fields. If you're in a quarterback conundrum, you've been streaming and you need a guy that maybe has some more upside to be a long-term every week starter, both Justin Fields and Kyler Murray have that ability given their rushing as well. I think Joe Burrow is going to sun run the rest of the season, so I would maybe buy high on him potentially as well. And then at tight end, I also really like going after, potentially, again, buying high on somebody like Dalton Kincaid, who I think could legitimately be absolutely dominant down the stretch. Same goes with a guy like Sam Laporta, who I think will be probably pretty solid. And, maybe you want to buy low on some of these like fringe tight ends, like a Trey McBride or a Kyle Pitts, knowing that, the quarterback upgrades may bear fruit at some point. Although I'm a little bit more hesitant in buying into like low end tight end ones. I'm more so going to buy high on higher end tight end assets that actually have the ability to move the needle.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. If I'm going to spend an asset to upgrade at tight end, I got to make sure that guy's a needle mover. And like you mentioned, guys like Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce is going to be available in your league, but who knows, man? He had a bad game. People might be a little like, oh, maybe Mark Andrews over him or Sam Laporta's over him. And they have these type of ideologies in their head. If you can go out and secure a guy like Travis Kelce, it's going to cost a lot, but if you can get him for even second round price tags, I'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, and Hawkinson, now that Jefferson's coming back, might be coming a little bit cheaper as well. With Josh Dobbs, people going, it's too many mouths to feed, all that nonsense. We know the narrative. So again, if you guys want access to our rest of season rankings where you can see, exactly the expert consensus versus where we have players ranked, you can kind of see who's a value from that perspective. Definitely check out the link down below in the pinned comment and in the description for flockfantasy.com. Promo code FSC will get you 30% off. You'll get our rest of season rankings, our weekly rankings and matchup charts. You'll get our dynasty rankings manifesto, which is going through a big update, which has trade value charts, quarterback, super flex, one quarterback, tight end premium, 2024 prospects, everything you can need dynasty rankings wise. We have you covered in there. And if you sign up annually, you'll get 6 months for free. You'll get a Zoom consultation with myself or with Danny, whichever one you prefer, as well as first dibs on dynasty decisions episodes, which we should be doing one this week. So make sure you get your submissions down below. And then also you're going to want to sign up for annual for another reason, because we have a lot of cool stuff coming to the site, trade calculators, whole revamp to the site aesthetic is coming very soon as well. So you're definitely going to want to, pay up front for the annual subscription, because it's going to be way better a year from now than the current state of our site right now. So definitely check that out. And again, of course, you get all of Mason's content. You get all of Zach and Badake's content, all of the domain guys content, all the endgame guys content. We've teamed up to bring you one great product. So again, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe if you are new around here. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.